I'd like to call to order the Forest Reserve Finance and Administration Committee meeting of Tuesday, July 23rd at 2 p.m. First order of business is roll call.
Berman,
Berman's here.
Caius,
Guys present.
Allen, Gums, Juby here, Leonard,
Leonard here.
Sanchez, Pepe,
Be here.
Williams. Okay, you have quorum?
So we do have a quorum. Next item is the approval of minutes from our April 23rd and June 25th, 2024 meeting. Do we have approval of those minutes?
Mr. Chair, this is Caius. I would ask for unanimous consent for the approval of the minutes from April 23rd and June 25th, 2024.
Is there any opposition to that? So be it. Item 3 is public comments. Do we have anybody signed up to speak? Very good. New and unfinished business. Item number 1 is TMP 24-2680, a presentation approval of the compensation and classification study. Ben.
Yes, it's my honor to introduce Jennifer Clough, who's our Director of Human Resources. She's going to give you a little background on how we got to this point, and then we have our consultant, Dr. Victoria McGrath, here from McGrath Consulting, who has a presentation for you. So take it away, Jen.
Well, good afternoon. I have a seat at the table, which means that I must have one impactful item that the commission has already done a lot of work to set the stage for your consideration, and that is a presentation of the recommendations from the district's compensation and classification study, and specifically a recommendation to modify the ordinance setting the salary ranges for all positions and the authorization of a one-time retroactive payment for all hours worked beginning July 1st, 2024. So to begin, I just want to color that recommendation with a little bit of history and context to better inform the commission in its consideration process. As the basis for engaging a third party to complete a study, the district considered a number of factors. The first of which is the district last completed a compensation and classification study in 2017 that was done in-house. Yes.
You get a little bit closer to the mic.
Yes, sir. New reclassified and retitled positions were added over time. However, no adjustments were made to salary ranges or compensation practices since that time. The best practice recommendation in human resources is that studies of this nature be completed every 3 to 5 years, and ideally that they be completed by a qualified third-party professional services firm. These consistent efforts ensure 2 things for the district. First, that we're financially responsible to our operations and to our employees. And second, that we're able to recruit and retain top talent. So the memo that you have in front of you today does have a lot of information and a big report that we're going to dive into as well, but I do want to highlight 3 salient points for you first. Number 1 is a direct result of not maintaining a competitive, equitable, and defensible compensation plan. The district has experienced numerous challenges. Those include a turnover rate of 18 to 21% in full-time positions over the course of the last 3 fiscal years. So that is not accounting for attrition through retirement or for attrition in part-time positions, which would increase those figures. We also see regular expressions of financial stress and burnout identified by current staff members through employee wellness screenings conducted by our insurance carrier, as well as employees' self-performance evaluations. Of course, it does go without being said, but I will say that there are incredibly high costs associated with those outcomes. So a rough and very conservative estimate of both the hard and soft costs associated with the turnover of one entry-level position at the district is roughly $15,000. And it would be really difficult for me to begin to quantify the costs for you of low morale, lost productivity, these types of things that employees experience when they have a sense of a lack of financial wellness. The second salient point that I would like to highlight is that the board has acknowledged the need to do this work at 3 separate points over the course of the last year, including when it improved a contract with McGrath Human Resources Group in the fall to commence a study, when it subsequently approved both new construction and CPI increases for the 2023 property tax levy, and finally, when it adopted the fiscal year 2024-2025 annual budget, which included an increased amount of $465,389 in full-time salaries, which were intended to implement the outcomes of this study. And the third thing that I want to highlight is that the district finds itself positioned to celebrate its 100th year of conservation. In the last few years alone, we've seen significant growth in our land holdings, endured a pandemic, and we have and continue to pursue ambitious goals with a very lean workforce. And this type of work demands that we have top talent. In terms of financial impact, funds totaling $5,473,399 were budgeted across all departments for full-time wages, as well as transfers from the general fund for corresponding contributions to IMRF, Social Security, and Medicare. The total implementation cost would result in a $68,917.82 surplus in full-time salaries, which would be used to offset a deficit of $66,826.57 in part-time wages. This would result in a total implementation cost, leaving a surplus of $2,091.25 in full and part-time wages and corresponding benefits. Overall, it's staff's recommendation that the board adopt a compensation and classification plan that's comparable to market averages and is internally equitable. The figures presented to you today, importantly, are inclusive of wages that could be affected by separate negotiations that are also subject to board approval. So the recommendation of staff is two-part. First, staff recommends that the committee approve the modification to the ordinance setting the salary ranges of employee positions. And a further recommendation that the committee authorize a one-time retroactive payment for actual hours worked in the fiscal year so that the increase can be effective July 1, 2024, as it was budgeted. And the second component of staff's recommendation is that all changes be implemented from the McGrath compensation and classification study with two modifications. The first is that the economic factor adjustment occur at the same time as eligible employees receive a step increase for ease of budgeting and transparency for the commission's process. And additionally, that the recommendations contained within Appendix B, which was the benefits analysis, some supplemental information that we contracted with McGrath to provide to us, requires some additional analysis and design before we would bring forth any recommendations related to components outside of the compensation piece of the consultant study. So with that preliminary information, it is my pleasure now to pass this along further and introduce Dr. Victoria McGrath of McGrath Human Resources Group. She'll be providing you with a presentation of the project's work, its findings and recommendations, and then we're both available to answer any questions of the committee members.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I am Dr. Victoria McGrath. I'm CEO of McGrath Human Resources Group. So what do I hit for? There we go. We've been asked to come in and take a look at, no, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Could you get me back at the beginning? Obviously, I'm IT challenged. Thank God I know compensation. But anyways, our firm has been around for 24 years. So this is not our first compensation system by any stretch of the imagination. Currently, we have close to 600 clients in 40 different states. I think it's kind of ironic, 2.5 years ago, I moved from Illinois to Tennessee, and I probably have more clients in Illinois now than when I actually lived here. So it's a very pleasure to be with you. My background is human resources. I started out in the private sector and then moved over to the dark side and to public sector many years ago and worked for municipalities in Wisconsin before starting our own business in the year 2000. So again, just a little bit about who we are. We deal predominantly with public sector entities. And then we have two divisions. McGrath Consulting Group, Inc. is the parent company, and we do public safety consulting, police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. And then we broke off in 2012 to McGrath Human Resources Group because we do more than police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. We do from the county level on down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did, how we did it, and obviously the results of the study. So I want to kind of set the stage, and I think we have to look at what's happened with the employment front over the past several years. We started out probably right before the pandemic in probably 2018, 2019 with something called the silver tsunami, which means that those of us, which none of us in your room qualify, would be that the baby boomers are starting to leave the workforce. And we started to feel that, but all of a sudden then we were hit with the pandemic, which of course really changed the landscape of how people work today. And during that time period, what we're looking at is this. You've got older folks leaving the workforce. You have younger folks entering the workforce that have very, very different philosophies. So you've got 30 to 40% of the workforce leaving, and then what are you going to do to supplement it? Because we don't have enough people to supplement everybody that's leaving the workforce. In addition to that, during this time period, for one reason or another, government sector employees or public sector employees really aren't being given the credit that they are. And it was no longer the, oh, let's go into government, because if you went into government, you had average wages and you had really, really, really good benefits. And now what's happening is the wages are still staying about average and the benefits are eroding. So the allure to come to the public sector to serve is really not there. The pandemic also brought the Great Resignation, where people said, you know what? I don't want to come into an office from 8 to 5 days a week. I want things called flexible work schedules. I want to work at home. And that's great for a lot of positions, but not a lot of positions that public sector serves. I'm not exactly sure how a park ranger or a police officer can be working from home, in their pajamas one day a week. It doesn't serve itself. So the lure to come here is really very low. In addition to that, then what hits us is inflation. And now we've got inflation where, no matter how much you try to give employees that dollar amount, it's not keeping up with the price of what it costs out there. I jokingly laugh because we were complaining in Tennessee that our gas prices went up to $3.09 this past week. And then I drove on my way here and realized I like my $3.09. But that inflation eats away at salaries. And if it costs more to buy that gas to get to work, or if it costs more for that loaf of bread or those eggs, they don't see that increase in their salary schedule. So thus having a strong structural compensation system isn't going to fix everything, but it's definitely something that is going to hopefully attract and retain employees. I think a couple of things to set the stage is this. You've got a very interesting dichotomy of a workforce. Number one, it's in your chart, it's in the packets you have, it's not on this chart, but 52% of your workforce has less than 5 years of service. In addition to that, you've got 30% of that is under the age of 40. And so we call that the mobile workforce. I had a client a year or so ago call that the shiny object workforce, which means it doesn't matter what the job is. If I can make $2 or $3 or $5 more, I'm going to move to that because I can have money in my pocket. And so therefore, the question's going to be with that is, how are you going to attract these people to be here? But more importantly, how are you going to attract them to stay here? Because as Jen indicated, it's true, turnover costs money. You take their salary plus benefits and about 1.5 more times of that. That's the average cost of turnover, probably double of that when you look at public safety. So turnover is expensive. You're going to have turnover, however, because 67% of your workforce is over the age of 40. And right now, you've got a whole bunch of folks that are age 50 and above that are holding up your average years of service. Your average years of service is 6, which is less than the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is close to 7. So I think you're seeing your years of service going down, A, because you've got people retiring, and as Jen indicated, you have a lot of turnover. So A, what kind of compensation and benefits package are you going to provide that's going to retract, you get them in the door, and once you get them in the door, what are you going to do to keep them? So how do we went about this is, number one, at the initial study, we had interviews with administration and with every department leader. That helps us set the stage, because if I look at some of your departments, number one, you don't have a lot of places around you that have comparable types of positions because you are kind of a unique entity, but also gives us clarification of what the department does and what those positions are. I'm going to pick on the title just for the sake of picking on it, an equipment operator. Well, what's an equipment operator? It can be somebody that is a light equipment operator, it could require a CDL, it can be a heavy equipment operator. One place I walked into was trash collectors. So, just because we have the title, what does the title actually mean? We spent some time looking at your current compensation system, job descriptions and policies as it relates to that. We did ask employees, not every one of them, to complete something called a position questionnaire. The position questionnaire takes the job and evaluates it in 13 different competencies and assigns points to it. That's one way we compare and contrast those positions, not only externally, but also internally within the organization. We solicit data from a number of different public organizations. I'll show you that slide in just a second. And we collect their salary schedule. We also collect what people are actually making in that field. That usually gives us a better representation of what the market is versus a salary range. In addition to that, we then went over the compensation with department directors, I should say Jen did. And then we did collect information on benefits. I'll highlight those very quickly at the end, but those do require a lot more work in order to implement. And so you need to take your time in looking those to see whether those recommendations are going to fit your organization. These are the organizations that we went to. We did receive data from every one of those organizations. However, of course, we did not get data on every position. We never do. That's impossible. But it also gives us a good broad representation of what's happening within the area. And a couple of those organizations I have worked with as well, which kind of helped. All right, we're going to compare your salary schedule and employee salary to the average market rate. When we do that, we establish something called a comp ratio. A comp ratio is the ratio of the average minimum, for example, to the minimum of this particular benchmark position. We used to schedule a range around that because 50% is the goal. 50% means you're being paid at the average market rate. But obviously someone's going to say, aha, the average market rate is $25,000 and I'm $24,692. Aha, I need a raise. And so that's why we establish a percentage range around that. 2 years ago, we changed that from a range to, let's put it this way, with the market the way it is and as quickly as it's moving, anything with a comp ratio less than 45% is being considered out of market and non-competitive. So let's take a look at how well you do. So we look at your minimum salary on a benchmark position and compare it to the average market rate of similar benchmark positions. Right now, when we look at those positions, 78% would be considered under market. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all under market, but those that are in the 30 to 44% of comp ratio are less under market than those that obviously are in the 0 to 19 comp ratio. 23% are aligned with the market. So not all of the entire schedule needs to be adjusted when it comes to the minimums. The problem we have with the minimums is that not only has the district, but also municipalities around you have a salary range, and not everybody's hiring at the minimum of the salary range because they're finding that they need to be more competitive. So this could actually be a little worse but there's no way to capture that data as to where they are actually starting within that range. Next thing, we look at the midpoint. The midpoint of a salary range should be considered the market rate. It means that person should be around that market range within 3 to 5 years, which means I'm fully capable and competent of doing the job. So obviously we wanted to see if your schedule built in 2017 had a midpoint that was representative of the market rate. It does not. That doesn't mean anything other than maybe that's not the way the schedule was originally built to reflect that. But obviously it does not trend at this point to the average market rate. And then when it comes to the max, there's maximum there. I don't do a lot with maximums. Salary schedules are built all over. I build salary ranges that are 20% from minimum to maximum to 50% to minimum to maximum. So it really depends upon the goal and outcome of that salary schedule. But obviously, if your minimum is below and your midpoint is below, your maximum is below. So that means they can go to places around you and have a higher earning capacity than they can here. This is probably the most reflective of the market because we're actually looking at what people are making compared to what the average person makes. And again, 76% are under market. A lot of that, however, has to do with the fact that you've got 52% of your employee base that's only less than 5 years of service. So if I see people in the 30 to 44 comp ratio, that's not bad. That could be that they're new employees and that they're at the lower end of the salary schedule. Same thing for those folks that are 60% above. It doesn't mean they're overpaid. It doesn't mean that they should get a pay cut. It means they've been here a long time and they've moved themselves through that salary range over their tenure within the district. The ones I'm concerned about are those under 29%, because that means they're probably in positions in which the salary range is no longer competitive. So even though you saw the numbers before of how far off you are, not everybody is going to be getting a significant increase. And of course, everybody walks into this feeling the fact that I'm underpaid, I'm wonderful, and I should get tons of money as a result of this. And they are wonderful and they are great employees, but they may not necessarily get a lot of money as a result of this, because not everybody is really that far under the market. Oops. So right now, your current salary range is problematic. Obviously, as you know, it has not been consistently updated, and probably since about 2010, 2011, folks around you have been increasing those schedules on a pretty regular basis. In addition to, when you do increase your salary range, you're not really increasing the employees. They're really only moving based upon merit. And merit's a phenomenal concept. The problem is merit increases these days are not keeping up with the market. You don't have enough money to spend to make merit worthwhile. Not back in the day when I was in HR in the 70s and 80s, when you got a merit increase and the difference was I got 18% and somebody got 10% and somebody got nothing. Now what we're doing is we're scribbling over little percentages. So my rock star employee is going to get 5%. My good employee that's doing what I'm supposed to be is getting 3%. And the difference between that, as I facetiously say, is a quarter. And let's divide it by 26 pay periods and be really motivated. So your merit increases really have not been keeping up with that. The other thing that I question, and this is not anything negative about your department directors, is it really a merit increase? Or because we're not keeping our salary schedule update, and because we know we have really good employees, are we kind of giving them increases not necessarily based upon merit, but that we want to keep them and retain them? So is it truly a merit system? So as a result, these two have not kept up with the market. Compensation philosophy, there's all different kinds of philosophies. One is to lead the market, basically say, can the district afford to pay higher than the average market rate? Working in the Midwest, I will tell you that's pretty much the average. It's something that elected officials can sell, that our employees are being paid the average. We are starting to see a creep. It's definitely happening in Missouri and Kansas. It's working its way this way, where we're saying, look, we need to have a competitive advantage. And so therefore, can we start paying higher than the average? So I'm building salary schedules now at the 55th, 60th, 70th percentiles to be more competitive than those around you. We're starting right now at the average. And that's the compensation philosophy that this system has been set at. As Jen went through, you are spending a lot of money just to get people to the average. And so to say that you're going to be higher than that means you need more money. And as I fondly say, instead of growing a lot of trees with leaves in the district, grow it with money. And therefore, you have the money to pay for it. Last but not least, you can follow the market, and hopefully that has not been a compensation philosophy, or at least that's not the one we want to set going forward. We have done that for some organizations that just fiscally cannot meet the challenges of meeting the average market rate. But the schedule that has been recommended to you is built on the average market rate. We are moving it from a salary range system to a step system. It's 12 steps. Which means every year you move to the next box as long as you have acceptable performance. It's not merit. It means I'm doing my job and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I move to the next box. Step systems are making a comeback. They're making a comeback, because as I said before, you really don't have enough money to make merit really an incentive. And number two, you've got a generation that wants to see where they want to be, where they're going. And they want to see what those boxes are going to look like going down the road. Step 6 does represent the average market rate, and that should be reached within 3 to 5 years. So if you have a brand new employee and they just have the minimal skills and education for the job, they'll most likely come in at step 1, which means in 4 or 5 years, they will get to step 6. You can hire higher than step 1, does need HR's conference to do that. But if you find somebody that has skills and experience that are beneficial, you can bring them higher than, which means they're going to reach that step 6 shorter than the 5 years. We have made some title changes. This sometimes gets very personal. Title changes were either to match the organization or to align positions within the organization. This is not to be construed as a demotion. It's not personal. One of the good things is having a third party do this is I don't know the people. You know, I can look at their position questionnaire and I can see it's Susie Smith, but I have no clue who Susie Smith is. And so therefore I'm basing it off the skills and education of the job, the responsibilities, what the market says. And these are the types of titles that we typically see within that. It has nothing to do with Susie Smith and whether she's a good employee or a bad employee. We use several factors, and I'm not going to go around the circle in a logical order, but the first one is the position analysis. That was the position questionnaire that we asked employees to complete out. Not only do employees complete it, I do have a consultant that reads through every position questionnaire and makes sure that those answers are filled in or are they appropriate. And then it adds up to a total number of points. I also read those position questionnaires when I'm placing positions because that's how I can compare and contrast positions across the board. Those, like I said, develop points. We group positions with similar points together. That's step 1. Step 2 is we look at the external market. Where does the minimum and where does the market rate say it should be based upon the schedule that has been developed? So you may have positions with similar point totals moving into different pay grades because the market dictates that it has to be paid at least this much, or when I get to step 6, I should be paid at least this much. The third thing we look at is compression. There's different types of compression, but compression is definitely, or is what I say, if I'm going from a level 1 to a level 2, if I'm going from a 2 to a supervisor, does it make sense for me to take on that additional responsibility? Or if I'm taking that position, do I lose money, or I'm all the way at the top of the salary range that I'm going to, and I have no earning capacity? So sometimes you can look at the points. You can look at the market, and it's nothing with where I placed it because I was looking at compression. And the last thing is internal comparability. Are positions that are doing similar work all banded together within the same pay grade? And I'm going to pick on administrative assistants, even though you don't have any here, which is an issue. You know, a lot of times I'm doing a county right now in Wisconsin. We have 48 different titles for administrative assistant. We don't need 48 titles for administrative assistants. So we're down to 5. And so comparing those across the board as to what they do. As I've indicated, Jen met with all department directors to provide feedback. And then she talked to me that, hey, I don't think so-and-so doesn't like this. And the answer that I'm always looking at is, are we applying the same methodology to every position? Because everybody becomes passionate about their employee and everybody wants to advocate for their employee. And you have a great group of employees, but are we using the same methodology to place that individual? Okay, now that I've got the schedule built and we have the positions in, we now need to place people. And so what we do initially is we place people on the step closest to their current pay without a decrease. That can be a large increase. If I'm significantly below step 1, I'm going to move you to step 1. Doesn't matter if you've been here for 1 day or 8 years, you're going to step 1 because it's the step closest to what you're currently making without a pay decrease. And so what happens then is we start getting in-range compression, because just think about it. If your salary schedule is here and I'm at the upper end and I just did this to your salary schedule, where are you? You're now at the middle or at the lower end of the salary schedule. But that gives the district the base costs to implement the salary schedule. What does it take to get people onto the salary schedule? I could be making $25, and the closest step to what I'm currently making without a decrease is $25.02. And woo, I got a whole 2 cents as a result of this study. Again, this has no reflection on the employee at all. It's to get people in the box. And how much does that cost? Now, the district has taken it one step further, and I applaud them for doing that, because there are a lot of people that didn't get a huge increase because they were paid okay, not the best, but they were paid okay, and they got 1 or 2 or 5 cents to get them in the box. And the district said, okay, now calculate out if everybody moves to the next step, so they got a minimum of a 3% increase. I will tell you that working for 24 years, not everybody is able to do that in the first year. Because it costs money, and it did cost money. Now what we're going to need to do, and you can't do it all at once. I've only had 1 or 2 clients in 24 years that were able to say, we're going to bite the bullet, and we're going to put people close to a step somewhere to their years in position. Maybe not be exactly the same, but we're going to get it close to that and get rid of that in-range compression. And that's something that you're going to have to evaluate in the next budget and possibly the budget after that. So I don't have a 5-year employee on step 3. But until you can figure out how much that's going to cost, you can do it. I will tell you right now, I have done that evaluation for numerous clients because they go, it's not that bad. Whatever number Jen gave you, triple it. And that's what it'll cost you to place people on the steps closest to their years in position. Although I did have one that recently did it, cost them $9 million. I'm not sure you've got $9 million to spend on making those types of adjustments. So. All right, managing the structure. All right, you've got a structure in place. Hopefully it is adopted. Now what you need to do is you need to keep it up, because you've spent all this money here. Now you got to make sure you maintain it. And the first one is you need to apply an economic indicator annually, and you need to be consistent. I don't care what economic indicator you use. We recommend CPIU. I know your finance person has recommended a tax number increase thing. That's the technical term for it. So you could look at what percentage. I have some folks that look, what's the percentage of increase of municipalities around you. Pick an indicator and stick with it. I know the recommendation is against what I did. I think you really need to separate those 2 schedules. And number 1, and I'm using January and July just as my example, January 1, the entire schedule. So if I'm step 1 is going to be there, but it goes up by 2, 3, 4, 5%, whatever it is you indicated. Then after a simple performance evaluation to make sure that I'm doing my job, then in July, I move to the next step. I think from an economic standpoint, that's better from a budget perspective. It's also psychologically better for employees because they can see that they're getting 2 increases per year. I know the district has gone around and around on that, and I think they're doing it all at the same time. That's fine. You can do what you want, but just make sure you do both of them so that you continue to keep up that schedule. Then every 3 to 5 years, we say that you need to do a dipstick in the market, do another compensation study. It's not as extensive as this one is. We don't need employees completing position questionnaires. We go out to the same comps. We take a look at those positions. I've got 2 of that I'm working right now on. We might be saying, okay, everybody's okay, but these 3 positions need to go up a pay grade because something's happened within their market. We might say, you know, it's time to get rid of steps 1 and 2. And add 2 steps at the end. As you know, I call them course corrections along the way, which means that you're therefore not saying, okay, 10 years later, we're going to do a huge course correction, which is going to cost you another, $600,000-$700,000. A couple other things is that to add is number 1, like I said, make sure you manage the system. You are going to have fiscally economic challenging times. That's going to happen. I don't know when they're going to happen because, no offense, my crystal ball on the economy is pretty darn cloudy right now. But let's go back to 2008. 2008, the economy crashed. You are most likely not going to be giving both the increase to the salary schedule and the step increase. And so at that point in time, you need to decide what can you afford during this time period. Most clients during that time are going to move people to the step because that way you're cleaning people out and you're getting further in, and then worry about adding money to the schedule once things become a little bit more economically feasible. We have added new positions in that schedule. You might see them. Those positions are what ifs, and this is, we think we're going to be doing this. However, just because they're on the schedule does not mean that they are approved. So they still need to be approved through whatever budget process that you currently have. Before we get into the next one, we also have made FLSA changes. The Fair Labor Standards Act is something that governs whether a person is exempt or non-exempt. They just, for the first time in like 30 some years, have crafted some of the rules. So July 1st, the rules changed, which happened right in between your study. And there'll be another change to that in January 1st of next year. So when we look at that, there is very specific criteria under the FLSA as to what can be exempt and what cannot be exempt. And it's not because we don't like you. It's not because you're not a professional anymore. It's nothing to do with you personally. It has to do, does this position fit the criteria that's established? The very first one is a salary criteria, and that's the one that's having the most significant impact with a lot of employers, because it's been whatever it has been for the last 30 some years is now going up substantially in July and really going up on January 1st. There will be an economic indicator applied to it every other year to make that increase. So I do work with departments, especially on our public safety side, where I have a paid fire chief, and it might be with a volunteer department. And because they don't meet the salary criteria, they're still non-exempt, even though they are the fire chief, because they don't meet that criteria. After that, we have to look at separate types of exemptions and the rules that apply to that. So a lot of it has to do with education, experience, has to do with ability of decision-making and judgment. And so I have put in the report what the FLSA guidelines are that apply to your organization. And again, if you were exempt and now go to non-exempt, it's not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of whether you're a professional or not. It's compliance with the law, plain and simple. You can always make somebody greater than the law, which means if they apply, if they are eligible for exempt, you can make them non-exempt because they're going to get more money that way. But if they are definitely qualify as non-exempt and you make them exempt, that's when you're going to run into some legal challenges if challenged. So we did that as well. Same thing with adopting the schedule. We are talking about adopting the schedule, and whatever it is that you are using for implementation, you use that for everybody. Including anybody that might be a contractual, because the schedule is built on compression. And if you're correcting everybody, but you're not correcting maybe the executive director or somebody else who might be under contract, we're going to start getting that compression again, and you're going to kind of smash that whole program together. Jen asked me to do kind of a staffing study. It really wasn't a staffing study per se, so these are just some overall observations. Number one is that your executive director's span of control is too large. You have one person representing 7 different departments, and that's wonderful. However, I've been here a couple times, and you are a very progressive, forward-thinking, strategic forest district. And in order to do that, you have to have somebody who's doing the strategic planning and making sure where you're going to be in the future, as well as working out those partnerships and things with residents, with other elected officials around you, and to be saddled down with looking at the operations of 7 departments, I think is really unrealistic. The other observation is you really have very little administrative staff. And I don't want to belittle administrative assistants in any way, shape, or form. That's how I started. But let's put it this way. You have, higher paid managers having to deal with a lot of their administrative types of responsibilities rather than focusing on the strategic direction and operations. You are also very lean. Again, this is not a staffing study, but you've got to applaud the folks that are here because they're doing yards of work with very little staff. So those are things just to take into consideration. Other things that we talked about, and then I'll stop talking now and you can ask questions. We did a look at health insurance and how you rate with other folks around you. We looked at time off benefits, made some recommendations. We evaluated your retirement plan. We gave some generic information on on-call certification pay. Some of that's going to take some work on the district side because first of all, I can't tell you what to give you certification pay on until you establish what do I need to have for the job. And then what's beneficial above that. So that's something that's going to have to be taken on by HR. We also gave some ideas of plans that are coming out. What we're seeing, especially on the private sector side, that are slowly trickling in to the public sector side, things like paid parental and elder care leave, long-term disability, childcare, college savings accounts, things of that nature. So those are there. Those are for you to evaluate, take some time. Does it really fit for your organization? But they're there for you to cogitate. So with that, I will stop talking and ascertain any questions.
Oh, Ms. Juby.
I think I missed it. What is the percentage in your step increases?
2.5%.
2.5? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Leonard?
Thank you. I was wondering, I had a couple questions for you. Number one, how many current employees are below step one on your step program?
I don't know that off the top of my head. Do you know it, Jen?
I have that there.
We can get
I
that.
can certainly get that for you, but
Could you answer then, where is step one? What is the pay range?
Well, there's a number of pay ranges. So the pay range is going to be different based upon the pay grade that the position has been placed in. So as you see here, step one for pay grade D starts at 2261 and it ends somewhere off the screen. So the positions in pay grade D all have that same similar pay range. So positions in pay grade D would have similar points, would have market data that says they should start between, somewhere around $22. They should get to somewhere around $25. And then obviously this low in the pay grade, I'm not looking at compression at this point in time. So each one of those pay grades have a different pay range associated with those factors.
Okay, and then with respect to implementing your plan, if we did what you are suggesting, in an ideal world, how much of a dollar increase would it mean to our budget for salaries and benefits?
$455,000.
How much?
$455,839.
And that would get everybody into the
plan.
and at the proper level.
At the proper pay grade and within that range. It may not be, if we went back to that D, I may have somebody that's at step 4 that's been here for 8 years and should be higher than step 4.
Move to another step.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
that 450 is keeping everybody in the level they're at, not moving them into the proper step. Is that correct?
Correct.
So how much would it be if we move them into the proper step?
Well, it would depend upon how far you want to move them. And so one, and I don't have the costing in front of me, one of them was, we said something to the effect of anybody who has 6 or more years of experience and is below step 6 would move to step 6. So that's one option to do it. We have different options where we say, okay, if you have 10 years or more and below step 6, we're going to give you 4 steps. And if you're, you're between 5 and 9, we're going to give you 4 steps. So those have not been costed out yet, because we need to, number one, are you implementing this? And are you implementing with the step arrangements that the district did? And then we can look at what those additional scenarios would be.
So we don't have really hard numbers.
Not for in-range compression step adjustments, no.
Okay. And then over the last 7 years, since 2017, since our last study was done, do you have information on what the average increase per year has been in each of those last 7 years for employees of the?
I do not.
Yeah, we can certainly compile that. So what we had done, a couple comments on that is, so the internal compression within grade, is essentially where the money that was allocated for this first implementation ran out. So we had intergrade, compression where we had supervisors making less than who they were supervising. So we focus, as a staff, we focused on correcting that, and are kind of starting to draft a phase 2 implementation, as Dr. McGrath mentioned, that would, get you the real number on what it would cost to do all of that tenured fixes. And with that coming at next budget cycle, you'll have the information from the operating referendum to see how affordable that actually is. So we could look at that. The average cost has come before the commission over the last 7 years when we've done that merit increase, but it's been in the low threes. So when Dr. McGrath was mentioning the low range of the merit increases being like 3 to 5%. What we've actually realized is 2.75 to 3.25. So that's why we're doing the big shift to a step system versus a range adjustment, if that helps.
I appreciate that, Ben. So with respect to implementing your program, what we would be looking at, and I'm just making a projection here, I could be way off, is instead of, on the average, a 3% increase, maybe a 5 or 6% increase per year.
Potentially, yes, because the step increase would eat up 2.5%, and then it would be depending upon how much you're going to then put onto that salary schedule. And that might vary per year.
So in essence, what we're probably looking at, and believe me, I think the employees are worth every penny they can get. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
they can afford to do it.
Mhm.
And that's my big concern. But if we do it this way, then we're probably looking in just a very general term of doubling our annual increase for employees.
That is correct.
I think that's actually a little bit high because we've
Okay.
had, we've realized at least 3% over the last 7 years, which is what we looked at to commit to a 2.5% step increase. With that economic factor, and Dave can speak more to this, PTEL is what we're looking at instead of CPIU, since that's more predictive
Good.
of the monies that are coming to the Forest Preserve District. And that's the factor that in this program is going to come before the committee annually. And we were estimating that probably more in the 2% range. So we'd realize more like a 4.5% if that is what was
So maybe a
appropriate.
50% additional increase over what we've been doing in the past, from 3 to 4.
Right. We're gonna have to look at it annually though, because
Yeah.
if we get into a recession type situation, which we've been in before, where we, worst case scenario, we've had a frozen levy. And that's what we wanted to, as a senior staff, when we're recommending that, we were frozen under a range system. It's a bad situation for everyone. So whether this is frozen or that's frozen, this gives you options where we can grant the step plus the economic factor, or just the economic factor, whatever's affordable per each budget.
And one last question, I'll let
okay.
somebody else ask questions. Jen, you had mentioned an 18% turnover
Correct.
over the last 3 years. Is that an annual?
Each year, 18 to 21% over
18
the
to
last,
21
correct.
Per year for the
Correct.
last 3 years. Okay, thank you.
I had a question on that. Does that include our early retirees?
It does not. That excluded anyone who retired from the district, and it also excluded part-time employees. We have a number of year-round part-time positions where we see turnover as well, but just looking at those full-time benefited positions that have a little bit more investment in terms of time and resources, it's a very significant figure
So
for
you're
turnover.
talking about termination and or resignation.
Correct, but the number of terminations over the course of the last 3 years is incredibly limited. So resignation primarily.
Thank you.
And to go to your issues as well, which are very, very solid, legitimate concerns, because obviously if you don't get the referendum, I think you're going to have to double back and say, can you afford a step system? Because step systems, once you implement them, are actually, they're very predictable. Your budget's going to be really easy. How much to put on the step, how much is step, you're done. I mean, that's it. But it's also the reason why in a lot of our studies, we recommend splitting those two out, because that way, if you do the steps, the schedule increase at one point, it's only hitting 6 months of your budget. When you do the step increase, it's only hitting 6 months of your budget. So economically, it's a little bit more fiscally feasible. But again, you have to do what you need to do in your organization.
So you're talking about blending the 2 6-month raises. So if they're 3% each 6 months, instead of 6, 4.5.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Oh, I don't know if I can call it you or not. Sorry, I didn't want to usurp the power of the president here, sorry.
Mr. Kepi.
Thank you, Tepe here. I have some serious concerns about this. Okay, first off. Perhaps my biggest concern is you're presenting us with a very comprehensive program that totally changes the way we pay people, the way we group people, the way we increase their compensation. And you're asking us to virtually approve this today. That
What?
really concerns me. Okay? So
go ahead.
I have a real problem with the fact that this is the first time we're seeing this. We're talking about, again, changing the way we compensate people, putting them in pay groups, creating new positions, okay? So suggesting new positions in administrative areas, okay? All of that is a major jolt to say, what's so wrong with the way we've been doing things? And, so this one really concerns me. Okay. Second, I agree with Mr. Leonard. We're immediately talking about pay raises on an annual basis of damn near 5%. Okay. That bothers me. And the third thing that I find somewhat alarming is the recommendation in here that all of this be retroactive to July 1, which really bothers me because I think it creates a level of anticipation with the employees that the board looks like bad guys if they don't go along with the recommendations. So I have some real concerns about the way this is being presented. Okay. I like the logic of it, but all of this has me saying, I'm a big no until this has really been examined. Look at some of the questions that Mr. Leonard asked. How much does it cost if we do this? How much does it cost if we do this? Again, there's an awful lot in here, including adding new positions, and that scares me. I don't think we have the money to do it.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, okay, number of points, but the first thing is this is the process that we have for bringing the information to the committee. So we have not skipped any steps. We met with Finance Chair Berman and President Caius prior to present this information to make sure it wasn't that. It absolutely is a major change to our compensation philosophy, and that's we budgeted for this and discussed it through the budgetary process. So as not to surprise. So I understand it's a major shift, but we are going exactly through the process that we defined for communicating this sort of thing to the board. And so it's not full approval at this committee. This is the recommendation that goes to the executive committee and full board vote. So absolutely it could be voted down. The changes on the annual percentage until you will have the annual opportunity to look at what that economic percentage is to know if we can afford it. The affordability for first year implementation is there because this is the amount that was levied for these increases, and we're within that budget. As far as long-term for the full 12-step process, that's to be seen. So that for sure could be something that needs to be reevaluated as early as year one. If it's a no vote on that referendum, it's all going to be dependent on that annual levy, and it might not be affordable in year one. So no doubt about that. It needs to be talked about. As far as the retroactive nature to July 1, that was when these funds were budgeted. So if it were not retroactive July 1, everything to staff has been communicated that is subject to board approval. Everything is draft. This isn't a done deal, and they should understand where senior staff have influence but not control. Control is not wrested away from the board. So we've communicated that to make sure that that's understood. But the July 1 retroactive isn't just to sweeten the pot, but to make sure that we don't have a surplus in the budget because these funds were meant to be spent out within that cycle. So those are the facts on that one. But I do it's not my intent or staff's intent to pop this on or spring the board. We can wait and take it through another cycle if you would like a deeper presentation, but Dr. McGrath will be at executive to give this presentation again and remote at full with any changes up to non-implementation of this program.
And I think to clarify just a couple of things too, the staffing recommendations are not something that I would recommend that you adopt at this point in time. You need to take a look at that. Plus, I also indicated in the report and in the presentation, any new positions still need to go through your full budgeting process. They're there as placeholders for that. You have been doing pretty much the same thing that you're doing right now. The only difference is you have a structure in place. You have been placing positions in pay grades. You have been giving some types of annual adjustments. I think we've pretty much seen those annual adjustments are not keeping up and are not working. You now have a formal system in which to put positions within pay grades, which you did not have. It's kind of what we thought it should be. So it's building the infrastructure that you need to have going forward. So that hasn't significantly changed. No offense, you're giving merit, but I know you're not really giving merit, okay?
If I
it
can
really
jump
hasn't
in
been merit.
before Mr. Leonard. Okay, this is all very logical and I can understand that. Okay, so I understand the logic of it. This is an awful lot to present and expect
For sure.
for an approval process.
sure.
So those, you know,
Very, very well
not
taken.
arguing about the logic of it and getting there at some point in time. I just don't like the rapidity of having to make these decisions and have it affect so many things at one time. Just bother me. Sorry, Ben.
No problem.
Good question. How would you like to approach, excuse me, how would you like to approach that?
Again, all of this is being presented at one time. I'd like to hear what Mr. Leonard has
All
to
right,
say about
Mr.
it. He and I usually are at odds.
So,
When we agree, you're in trouble.
you know, a couple of things. First of all, since all of this really being a long-term implemented plan is contingent upon the referendum passing, I'm wondering if we shouldn't delay this until after the referendum to make sure we've got that money. I mean, doing it now and then if the referendum would not pass, which I don't believe it will not pass, I think it will pass. But if it doesn't, worst case scenario, then we have a problem. So my suggestion would be, number one, that we delay this decision to implement this plan until after we know we have the money from the referendum. The second point, and I think was very wise on your part in your study, not to go into a deep dive on the health insurance and benefits. I've gone through that very thoroughly, and that is an additional expense each and every year that's going to add to that pay increase. So when I was talking about a 6% increase a year, let's say we blend it 6 months at a time and it's 4.5% a year. After the first year, it becomes 6%. And then we also have the benefit increase.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is probably, conservatively speaking, taking the payroll and benefit structure from roughly 5.5 million to 6.5 million. And then an increase on that every year of maybe 6-7% with benefits. So I agree with Mr. Tapia. I need time to, I read over your report twice and I still don't understand all of it.
Mhm.
So it's the type of thing for me to vote on something that I haven't studied and don't understand. I can't vote yes on anything. I've done that in the county. I do it here. So I need more time to study it, but I would recommend that we consider tabling this until after the referendum vote to make sure we have the money.
I can't speak to the referendum and I'll let Ben go to that. I will tell you then, just know the price tag is going to go up because you've got folks around you that are doing comp studies right now. I'm involved in some of them. And so they're increasing their wages. So by the time your referendum comes in November, you're going to be looking at 2025 wages, which I'll tell you right now are going up in your area anywhere from 3 to 5%.
So then we would even be in worse shape if the referendum doesn't pass and we implement it now.
Actually, I think you'd be in worse shape if you didn't implement it now, because now you're not going to implement it in November and you're going to be further behind.
Ms. Julie?
So, I was actually surprised that we didn't have a step and lane because I come from education. So, where you guys are all really kind of worried about it, I'm really comfortable with it because I know what our expectation is going to be. I also know that if we don't have the money, we don't have the money. But we currently have a problem now. The problem's not gonna go away. We're not paying people what we should be paying them in 76% of our,
Mhm.
right, so that's not gonna go away, whether we pass a referendum or not. So I don't feel rushed. I don't feel like I'm not getting enough information. Am I scared if we don't pass the referendum? Yes. But I'm also scared if we do pass the referendum and don't have this in place. So I think it's moving the proper way through, and I support it. I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with the fact that all of our steps are the same percentage. Woohoo! Yay! Yay that you did that, because that's a huge
It is.
problem with a step
Mhm.
calendar. So I'm
And you can always go backwards. And again, that's obviously something you have to walk back from employees. It's easier to go from a step schedule and jump back to a range because you can't afford the steps than it is to then say, okay, now we're going to go to a step system and have the extra cost to it. So even if you did implement it now and you find out in November, heaven forbid that you didn't get the referendum, you can pull out. You got step 1, you got step 6,
Yep.
and you got the top step. People already have been placed within there. So you've got some of the in-range compression, and at least you now have a range model that's competitive, that you can then fiscally work your way through.
Mr. Childs.
I would just want to echo partly what Ms. Juby said. Clearly, we do have a problem when we lose in the last 2 years, 1 of every 5
Mhm.
people, that 21%, something like that. That is pretty significant. So I think that to say that this is, I don't know what was wrong with the old system. I think that there is something wrong with the old system. What we're doing now, we've already, as you mentioned, Mr. Habither, budgeted for this in the upcoming year. So
We're budgeting.
really, everything that we would be doing up until, well, you know about what the what the referendum will do has been budgeted for anyway. So it's not like I'm all of a sudden asking for a bunch of money that we didn't plan on, and we have planned on that for months now. And then lastly, it's again, not permanent, as none of these systems are. We've got it budgeted. We can take the steps now. If it isn't working out, we punt, and actually it's easier to drop back, I guess, from what Victoria said. Virginia said.
Yes, sir. Go.
Roth here. You talked about the turnover the last 3 years at 18%. What are the surrounding turnovers, like other forest reserves or other park districts?
I
That's
can't
one of my
speak to all of them 'cause I
questions.
don't have that. Jen might have that. I did do the Forest Preserve of DuPage County a year ago, and I'm going to say off the top of my head, and if they correct me because I'm wrong, I think there's close to 6 to 7
Okay.
percent.
And then judging whether we have proper compensation, is there anything other than turnover to judge that we have a decent compensation?
I think one of the things I was going to mention, and it goes to what's the problem with the current system, is
Right.
that we don't have a defined compensation philosophy like we're attempting here. And it has pretty much been to get people in at the bottom of the pay range. And then we stated that our philosophy was to move that pay range 2% every year, but we haven't done it since 2017. So accordingly, the market analysis is about 10 to 12% above where it was in 2017. So we're having to bring, with so much turnover, we're realizing we're having to bring people in 10 and 12% above that. So some sort of fix needs to happen. And then
Well, I'm talking to the idea, the concept. We know it's working based off of what? Other than turnover, is there anything else you can judge on that?
Well, I don't usually look at, I mean, I look at turnover to some extent. I'm looking at where are you in relationship to the external market.
Right.
And so the analysis of where your salary ranges are in relationship to the average market rate around you. We also did do a private sector search, and I won't bring that data to you.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
You're,
I mean-
say you're not competitive with the private sector right now.
Right.
But you know, again.
And that's usually true anyway.
It is
right?
true. It is
Yeah.
true. But it's good to have that information. So when I'm looking at placing a position and go, okay, do I turn right to an engineering firm or do I turn left into the district and how
Right,
far apart? Are
right.
they? But also to answer your question, and again, we're not going to go into today, is the total rewards. It's not just compensation that makes a person want to stay with an organization.
Yeah, no.
And, you do have some avenues to look at in the way of benefits and things that might be very proactive for employees. And I agree, it's not a decision to take lightly. We do a very cursory evaluation on health insurance that you need to take to your benefits broker and have them weigh out what that's going to be. It's just to say, okay, you rank here when it comes to employee contributions, but we're not looking at plan design and things of that.
Right,
nature.
right.
But some of those other benefits, we found folks during COVID, when, it was hard to give salary increases, what we did, what a lot of our employees, our clients were doing was not increasing health insurance as much that time period, because that's easy to give an employee increase for that time period because you're not taking it out of their employee health insurance. And it's easier to put back than it is to say, okay, we're now going to cut your pay going forward.
Right, right. And I mean, and the other thing, 18% is what's the cost of retraining?
Mhm.
Well, 15,000,
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
so that needs
Some
to,
turnover is good. You got to have some turnover.
well, that's why
Yeah.
you never want it to be zero.
Right,
But you don't want to be a training ground
right.
for Page.
Right, I
Yeah.
agree.
I mean,
Okay, that's all.
Right. I have comments that, in lieu of a merit system, which we would be a long way from implementing, the step system is probably the most significant. And in my past experience with a large park district and the municipalities, that a step system is the way to go. And I think the experience is there. I think the knowledge is there. Done a great presentation, a great study. And I think that this is the way for us to move forward. Personal opinion. Any other comments? Ben?
If I could, yeah, I just wanted to mention that we do have, with the new positions that are part of this, they're part of an appendix that's not being adopted, part of the report. So that would be a future thing to consideration, like we talked about the deputy director on there. A vote to implement the STEP system is not a vote to approve those positions. Just want to point it out.
we're not going to take your jobs away from you. It's okay.
There's a cost associated with that, yeah. But
We're going to do 7 jobs. It's okay.
it is a big fix where senior staff are attempting to fix this at the same time, but that the money is budgeted. The money that would normally be budgeted for a merit increase this year is used for this implementation. It's a little higher than it would normally be on that merit increase, but if it was the decision of the board to do some sort of hybrid or one more year at this to find out the outcome of that, I suppose we could bring other scenarios to how to get this year's increase in and then fund something follow on. Just going to mention that.
Mr. Childs.
I will move that we pass it.
Gums will second.
We have a motion and a second. More discussion.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, okay. I want to make sure that I understand what we're voting on. Okay, because a lot has been presented.
Yes.
Right? So are we voting on, based upon this ordinance, are we voting on just this pay structure?
You're voting on
That
this.
is presented here in
Voting on it.
2 pages of the pay structure based upon,
Yeah,
or
so
are we voting on the 12?
the
are we
implementation of the 12-step program, the first year of implementation, that's what that 460,000 is for contractual employees.
So the district currently has an ordinance in place that sets the salary range for all positions. It looks very similar to what's been presented to you today, except that instead of ranges, there are 12 steps associated with each of those pay grades. So what you'd be voting on is the modification to that ordinance. So that usually comes before you in July of each year. We're just about there. We're about a month behind when we're usually bringing that ordinance in front of you. So again, each year you review that. Sometimes some positions are retitled or reclassified, but we've made no adjustments to those ranges. So this instead classifies each of those positions and provides for that 12-step range. Beyond that, you would be in adopting that schedule, you would also be authorizing staff to make those pay adjustments for each of the impacted employees. And again, that recommendation was retroactive to July 1st, twofold because it is how it was budgeted, but it's also the time of year at which employees typically receive their merit increases on an annual basis.
But within here, this also has a deputy executive director position.
So
No.
yeah, so again, we did ask the consultants to do a very limited staffing analysis and identify areas in which the district might have opportunities to consider, growth in positions. And so the positions that are on there, you can have positions on your schedule that may or may not be in place. For example, years ago, we had administrative assistants. That position remains on our schedule, even though we don't have any administrative assistants. So this would not change the authorized level of staffing that's in the fiscal year 2024, 2025 budget that was adopted. No additional positions would be added. However, they're placed on the schedule just so that for future purposes, we'd understand where they belonged.
Joe.
Leonard,
Yes, I just wanted to ask with respect to approving this step program, what is the percentage increase on? Because I've heard we can adjust that, or what would we be approving per step? Is it a 3% increase, a 2.5%, I think? I heard someone
So
mention.
right now, each of the positions are 2.5% apart. And again, this schedule by ordinance comes before the board each year. So if there were an interest in adjusting that schedule amount to be a different percentage, that modification can be made.
Or it would be done for your July budget next year.
But, excuse me, but following up on Mr. Leonard's point, the amount of the adjustment is the 300 and the
400.
amount of money,
455,839.
okay, which cannot be carried forward to next year based upon our current financial situation, correct?
Oh,
The only thing I could say is the schedule is built on the 2024 dollars. So what do you do in 25? That's up to.
Yep.
Hi. If I can add a little clarity to that and really why we strayed a little bit from the recommendation in terms of how to implement that economic factor increase. It's really due to the timing of the district, since we have over 73% of our revenue from property taxes. We're establishing that levy by November each year. Then we're starting to work on the budget between December and then approving it in April for that next fiscal year. So really what we wanted to do was to, one, implement the step system, which if an employee earned that step, it would increase by 2.5%. But the economic factor can really be determined by the board through the budget process that way. And we already know then what the levy is and how much it's going to increase for the next fiscal year, so that you really have all that information in front of you to make sure that it is an affordable plan for the district. So that's why we had that modification from the McGrath study.
Julie,
So would it make more sense? I don't know how we can do this, but I understand what Vern is saying about the approval of the compensation and classification study does seem like it's everything that's being presented, because that's how that normally would work. So would it be possible to dive that, take that down a little bit and talk about the implementation of a step system and create a classification system without hires on there? I mean, is there some way we can make it so there isn't wiggle room? Because I understand exactly what Mr. Tuppy is saying.
Yep.
What it's asking us to do is accept everything in this report, and we're not. So.
Mr.
Just-
Berman,
I would just
sorry.
mention that we were trying to move all those things to a separate appendix and write the exemption and the recommendation. So the 2 points in the back end of the memo with recommendation, talking about what Dave just did with the change with the economic factor and not accepting the any analyzed positions
Okay.
would be moved to appendix B, trying to get at that.
Okay,
And
so-
I don't know if that's acceptable,
so
but
we're-
we're trying to hit that.
Basically what you're saying is what I just said, you've already said in the explanation. So it's just this title that's a little bit a disconnect from what we're actually doing. Or I guess not, if if we're doing the classification study that the staff has modified.
Correct.
Okay,
Ms. Gums?
Thank you, Mr. Rowan. I understand what everybody's saying here, but I think we're not saying we're gonna hire these people. It's literally a placeholder, so we're not approving any of that. Is that, I mean, is that the biggest concern here, is that we're gonna, by approving this, the way it's written, we're going to approve those positions, and that's not the case.
right, no.
We're just saying they're in the schedule, we see them there, and then going forward, we have the authority to approve or not approve those new positions. We're not doing that today. But
Right.
we're saying we can in the future.
So
Yeah,
maybe
so
we,
you can, two approaches potentially to that. We can either modify the schedule to remove those positions that had been contemplated by McGrath as potentially appropriate for the district in the future. But if you see at the very bottom of the schedule, there's an asterisk next to each of those positions. And it suggests that these are positions that were recommended by the study and they are not authorized by the annual budget. So,
Right.
Staff doesn't have the authorization to hire or create any additional positions without bringing those in front of the board in the annual budget process as we have in the
That's what I
past.
thought.
So, I would suggest that it already addresses that concern. But we could also modify the schedule to,
Make it more clear.
to remove those if.
Ms. Juby?
okay, so even though I didn't make the motion or the second, I would suggest that the person who made the motion modify it to read the presentation and approval of the compensation and classification study with staff modifications. Because then that just goes to the two things that the step and the modification, and it removes any chance of us thinking it makes us hire those positions. But I didn't motion,
I don't know,
so.
does that sound good?
Motion is out, of course, I understand it. It can be modified by the maker
Yeah,
of the
but-
motion and person who seconded agreement, as I understand it. We're just simply adding the words as modified by staff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's in the title.
That we would be changing the title so that we don't have the,
So that when it
we don't
comes
have
to
the
exec-
ambiguity that it,
When it comes to exec, we'll have that in there, even though they asterisk, it'll refer to the asterisk to say that this isn't really something they could do anyway.
Right.
Well, I'd be happy to include that.
And I will,
Very simple thing.
agree to your, so you're
My
amending your motion?
My motion to include that particular thing, which
Okay.
says that.
I will,
that
amend
that
my
wording
second.
That said,
I will amend my second.
I'd like to hear the wording
no.
again. I'd like to hear the wording again, Chris.
I would too.
should I do with staff modification?
That's what I wrote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Presentation and approval of the compensation and classification study with staff modifications.
With staff modifications.
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
No further discussion. Roll call. Here we go.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Caius,
Guys, yes.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Should be I.
Leonard,
Leonard, no.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Tepe,
Tippy, no.
Williams. It passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2 under new business is PMP 24-2679, an ordinance amending an ordinance setting the salary ranges of employee positions of the Forest Preserve District of Kane County.
Guys would move.
Should be seconds.
Discussion, Mr.
Did you?
Is
could
that
mind
what we
just
just
putting this is what Jen had mentioned, rather than going from our previous pay scale, this is adopting the step schedule, so formality tied to the implementation. Unless you're curious to say more about it.
Which we previously discussed.
As
Correct.
previously discussed.
Is there any other discussion? Any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Caius,
Guys, yes.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Leonard,
Leonard, no.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Pepe,
Pepe, no.
Williams. It's approved.
Very good. GMP 24-2678, presentation approval of closed session minutes. Do we need to go into closed session to,
Yes, we do.
Not for this portion,
pardon?
not for this portion. This
Not
can be
for this
voted on
portion.
publicly.
Do we vote? on it
Everybody is
before we
seen
go into
those?
closed session?
These are available. We keep these in Gabby's office, period, twice a year, I believe we're mandated to release these. So we review these twice a year. In your packet, you can see the highlighted dates that were reviewed to remain in compliance with the statute. And if you'd like to see those are available whenever you'd like. Those are also vetted by our corporate counsel to make sure that those are no longer secret.
Do we have a motion to approve? We did not.
Not yet.
Nope.
No, we have a motion to
I
approve.
moved the last two. Somebody else, jump in.
Leonard will move.
Debbie, jump in.
Second.
Uh,
Who was the second? Leonard said.
Miss Allen was the second.
She's getting volunteered on these?
Can we do a voice vote on this?
All right.
I guess not.
Yeah. Sure.
Is this a voice vote, Mr. Chairman?
Approval of closed session, right?
No, we're not.
So all in
They're
favor?
minutes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So be it.
Okay, we're not doing that yet. Aye.
Aye.
Very good. All right. We need a motion to go into closed session to discuss license agreements and personnel.
Aye.
Tepe moves.
Aye,
Leonard
second.
seconds.
Deputy Caius. Roll call, please.
Moving along.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Caius,
Caius, yes.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Gums,
Grams, yes.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Pepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams. It's approved.
Very good.
All right, take a minute.
Does-
Last year, almost.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Literally,
We're
I'm
back in re-
going, so we
We're
can-
back in regular session.
We'll take
My brother had a
something that can be
pancreatic
covered
attack
this
last
amount of
night.
time.
We need roll call.
Yeah,
Make
because
roll call,
I'm working at like
please.
2 hours of sleep, not even 2 hours.
For attendance,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Berman,
Pancreatic-
Berman's here.
Caius,
Caius present.
No,
Allen?
Definitely not.
Alan present.
Gums,
Gums here.
Juby,
Juby here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Sanchez,
Sanchez present.
Pepe,
Tepe here. Oh, okay.
Williams. Okay, a quorum.
All right, I'd ask for a motion to approve a resolution.
Oh, that's not on the agenda.
No, it's not.
Whoa,
Never mind.
that was, we're not voting on that.
Approve to place this resolution on the executive committee meeting
There you
for
go.
August 8th.
There you go.
And the resolution is the resolution approving an amendment to the executive director's employment contract. So I need a motion to
Leonard will move.
Alan will
place this
second.
on the executive.
Point of
We
order.
have a
are we
motion to
allowed
second.
To do that?
Alan.
Just,
Leonard and Alan.
Discussion.
Gums has a motion.
What was that?
I'd like to amend.
Oh,
You can't,
Yeah.
it's not on to be amended.
it's not, you know,
have to wait till.
Oh, I have to wait till.
Executive.
yeah,
Yeah.
See, I really need a
we're
nap.
just going to,
Just to put it on.
We're just moving it forward.
On the
Roll call
agenda
vote,
for the
close
next
session.
meeting.
save your
Save it. for-
amendment. Don't forget it.
Trust me, I won't.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Wait, what are we roll calling?
Well, on approval of the, putting this resolution on the executive committee meeting of August 8th.
We could just do a voice vote.
No.
We did.
Um,
Motion second.
All those in favor say aye.
No.
Aye.
I.
Opposed?
Yep.
Okay, next thing on our agenda is communication.
Yeah, sure. I'll do a quick one before Lori gets up here. I just
There.
wanted to bring this to the committee. We're looking to, I guess I'm looking under my authority to approve this with Cougars. We've got a Christmas show coming to Cougars. They look for different ways to earn revenue in the off season. So November 15th to January 15th, this track that you're looking at would be, it's going to be filled with a Christmas lights show. And so
Oh.
they're working with a third-party vendor. They charge them rent, and they'll bring people through there. And I bring it to the board's attention because there's a little cut through to Cherry Lane you might use when you leave here to make a left turn. That's going to be blocked for 2 months. I spoke to the building manager here as well as strikers. They like this arrangement because it keeps traffic off of their lots as well as away from the kids over at the soccer facility. So just wanted to communicate that as this will be very obvious once it's filled with lights that we fully vetted that with the Cougars and are looking to approve this afternoon.
Where was the cut through?
So this is yeah, right there.
Oh, so
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't know about it, it's a great way to make a left to head north on Kirk.
Yeah.
So, but it's not a main traffic thoroughfare.
Oh,
Do we get a cut of this?
They get to pay their rent.
Oh, well, okay.
So, but that's why we try to facilitate to make sure that their rent comes in.
Fine with that.
well, that's something new, huh? All right. Communication.
For communications, I wanted to call your attention to some website improvements we've made for accessibility. And then Kate, if you could go to the website, when you're looking at the district's website, at the bottom right, you'll see a wheelchair icon. And if you click on that, it will provide different profiles for seizure safe, vision impaired, ADHD friendly, cognitive disability, keyboard navigation, so motor skills it'll tap through. It'll do a screen reader for blind users. And then also has content, color, and orientation adjustments. So
Right.
thank you. So I did it all myself. No, I'm kidding. So that is working and live now. And you also might notice that we have our new tagline, Preserving Nature, Enriching Lives, on our homepage. And that is taking the place of
Nature's our business.
Nature's our business. It was so great, I forgot it already. So anyway, this is our new one, and you'll be seeing this in multiple places. And then back to the PowerPoint. Join us for the Rusty Rodeo. That's August 10th. We have 2 locations at North Aurora Island Park and then on the west side of the Fox River by the historic Piano Factory pedestrian bridge. Help naturalists round up as many invasive rusty crayfish as we can find in an effort to reduce their numbers. We've done so well at reducing their numbers at Glenwood Park Forest Preserve that we're not having it there this year. So everyone is welcome. Come on out. No registration required, but make sure to wear closed-toed shoes and clothes that can get muddy because you will be in and around the river.
And bring a net,
I'm sorry?
bring a net.
Bring a net. Bring a dip net if you have one. Thank you. If you don't, we'll have some to loan. And then the next thing I have is the Kane Forest Preserve Foundation has their golf outing coming up, and some of our sponsors are starting to come in. You can see them on the screen. If you have contacts that you would like us to call or email on your behalf that you think might sponsor our foundation golf outing, we'd be happy to call or email them for you. Just let me know or Brittany Kovach know, and you'll see us at all the committee and commission meetings. And then the last thing I have is there is a referendum going to be on the ballot November 5th, as you all know. And so I'm putting together public information for that. And so the referendum is on our website and you can get to it multiple places. If you go to the home page, there's a little blurb about the referendum page, or you can go directly to kaneforest.com/referendum, which is what Kate has pulled up. Or you can scan a QR code on these business cards. I've got one in my hand right here, but there's a box of them over there against the wall. And the purpose of the cards is if you run into somebody out in the public who has questions that you can't answer, or you want them to have more information, just give them a card and they can scan the QR code on here and they can
Good idea.
get to the page with more information.
That's,
Good idea.
And that was it for communications. Feel free to take any cards on your way out.
Just real quick, we're out of time, so I don't want to bring it up, but at one of the Thursday meeting, can we talk about Max 15?
Yeah, what did you want to talk about?
I'll take
Want to
it
talk about
offline.
after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can't because I gotta go, but I'll talk.
You know where to find me.
I've got one small thing to add. So tomorrow night between 4:30 and 6:30, we'll be hosting a public input session here in the boardroom for the Glenwood Forest Preserve. So we'll be applying for an OSLIDE grant in September of this year, and one of those pieces is to do an input session. So if you find yourself over this way between 4:30 and 6:30, feel free to swing by. Thank you.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're out of here.